Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, the creator of the APAHM project, and today we are joined by my good friend Adam. And today we're talking about Chang can dunk. Yay!
Yay. Good movie.
Adam, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Um, I'm, I'd always like stutter at this because I don't know how to like really talk about myself very well, I guess. But I was raised in Chicago, adopted from the Philippines, raised in Chicago for pretty much my entire childhood. Went to a small town for high school, in Paris, Tennessee, and then came to CBU to college and met Lauren,
Yeah.
and also a lot of my friends, my wife, and then wound up staying here in Memphis. And now I run a toy store online named Memphis Emporium.
Yes.
So,
Adam has been a guest before on the APAHM project last year. We covered the Wish Dragon. And the reason why I didn't ask you, tell us why you chose Chink and Dunk is because Adam did not choose Chink and Dunk. um, Adam and I originally were supposed to watch American Born Chinese, but because of a last minute thing in my schedule, I wasn't able to accommodate the interview in time. So I asked them to last minute watch Chink and Dunk so we can talk about it instead. But it's also kind of fitting because Adam and I are both Memphis Grizzlies fans. And so during this year's playoffs, we were, texting about the games back and forth and our team. And so I think it was kind of fitting in a way. Like I knew it was going to be something that we could probably talk about pretty easily.
sure.
Besides the fact that it's about basketball, there's a lot of good universal themes in there. Um, and so yeah, Chink and Dunk is a pretty straightforward plot. It's about a high school kid who bets another high school kid who's on the basketball team that he can dunk a basketball by homecoming. And I think the stakes were a Pokemon card and a Kobe Bryant jersey.
Yep.
So, long story short, he, you know, tries and tries and trains to dunk a basketball, and um, he does it and rises to internet fame, and all for it to turn out that he lied and cheated. Spoiler alert. He lied
Yeah,
and cheated and, has to suffer those consequences. So um, I felt like the movie in a lot of ways felt like those old Disney Channel movies that you used to watch, especially ones that
for
kind of
sure.
have to do with, there were a lot of sports ones back on Disney Channel, but especially the one that kept popping in my head was like Eddie's $1 Million Bake Off cook off.
Mm,
I guess because it went against the status quo. Same thing with like kind of like High School Musical, right? Like everything's kind of like going against the status quo of these Disney movies. Where I think Chang is only like 5'8" or something.
right.
Even though he loves basketball and he loves Kobe and the Mamba mentality and the Kobe mentality, like um he is going against the norm because he's uh one, he's Asian, two, he's short, and three, he's not on the basketball team like the other guy is. So who has proven that he can dunk a basketball, the other kid. So
Right.
yeah, that's how it kind of felt to me. But it was very enjoyable. There were some nuances here and there. Adam, how did you feel just like a general takeaway from the movie?
Oh, I definitely enjoyed it. I think that especially in sports like basketball and these more physical sports that
Yeah.
we have, there's never been a huge amount of Asian representation.
Hmm.
We're known like baseball is different because Japanese players have been coming over here for a long
Mm.
time. We have Chinese leagues and things like that.
Mm.
And of course, basketball has that too, but there's a lot less of a chance of players coming over and playing, and then also being role models for younger generations. And I think something like this, kind of anytime that we have movies like this, they kind of put an emphasis on a little more physical sports or more uh, events like this, it's something that's it's nice to see. It's kind of like you said, kind of changes the pace a little bit.
Hmm.
So, and I think that it's nice that they also kept with the fact that he's not. We talk about Yao Ming and how big of an influence he had
Right.
when he was here, but he was also 7 foot.
Right.
He was geared to be a basketball player. I think the
Yeah.
the kind of brilliance behind what they did with Chang is that they kept it in the way that he is this average sized, not he's not there's a chances that he's not going to be a big NBA player or anything like that, but
Right.
they were able to kind of push through those obstacles and show how he had to deal with that, which of course is the basis of the whole movie. But I think that's a
Hmm.
good, they didn't make him. They could have made him taller or made his character taller or
Yeah.
stronger or stuff like that. So I think that's nice to see
And he
that kind of
was
change.
he was like in the marching band. So like you said, he definitely wasn't built to be a basketball player. Like it's not like uh an obvious, right, that he wants
Right.
to play sports. I remember having a girlfriend of mine who was like 6 foot and she played volleyball, but everybody would like uh I guess like tease her or like in a way it is like a form of like bullying, but they'd be like, oh, are you on the basketball team? Just because she's tall, right? So like even
Right.
those types of stereotypes exist. Um, I do remember when Disney put out the casting call for this movie, how Disney is really doing a better job at saying we're not looking for actors per se. We're looking for people who fit this description, and then we can decide like if they can act or direct them and teach them to act. They're doing the same thing with like the Moana live action, the Lilo and Stitch live action. And I remember for Chang, it was like I believe they put the height in there. I think they said he's like 5'8",
Hmm.
he's Chinese, and he should be able to speak Mandarin on a decent level or a beginner level, and then that he plays basketball. So I guess they found, I don't even know the actor's name, but I guess they found this kid through this open casting call. I really applaud Disney for their effort to not just keep casting the same people. Like even the mom in this movie, they could have easily cast like Constance Wu or, to bring in viewership. And you can tell that they
For sure.
are looking for more authentic voices and people who are going to bring that authenticity to the character more so than they're looking for star power. Because I think also Disney kind of knows that people are going to watch their stuff. So why not give that
Yeah.
opportunity and that face time to other people who maybe never thought about acting or who've always wanted to act, and now here's their chance because they're looking for anyone. So the pool is bigger. So I think that's really more progressive of Disney.
For sure.
Um,
And I think that's a good thing too, because with it being Disney, everybody's going to kind of pull from what they do. So I think that
mhm.
if Disney continues to kind of lead the charge with that, that's a great thing
Yeah,
because that means that it's going to open up possibilities for a lot of other studios, a lot of other, all over the US is going to be
yeah,
great.
yeah. I would say it's safe to say statistically, like the NBA or like professional basketball is a most like a predominantly like black I'm not gonna say it's a black sport, but like, a lot of players are African American descent. Um, so it's really interesting that they specifically chose to tell this story from an Asian perspective. Um,
For sure.
Especially like you were saying, like, we don't always have a lot of representation, Asian representation in sports. And I think that comes a lot from the stereotype that parents, Asian parents want their kids to pursue um, something more stable, right? Like the odds of you becoming a professional um, sports person, athlete, sports person. The word is athlete. Is
There you go.
is pretty low, honestly, and so I think that's why there's usually a kind of lack of representation in those fields. But they could have told this story from another kid's perspective or another background's perspective. Um, so what do you think about the fact that they purposely chose, it to be about an Asian kid and, what that could mean for other Asian kids who want to pursue sports?
I think it's great because it again the whole theme of the movie is overcoming obstacles, and I think
Hmm.
a big part of that is we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of Asian people, like you said, in things like basketball. So that's a big, how do you get over that hurdle?
Hmm.
Even if you make, things like even if you make the team, if you go to tryouts, are you going to actually be able to play? Are you going to sit
Right.
on the bench? And so I think it just adds another layer of obstacles that he had to overcome. And I think the best part of that is that it helps to show that you can overcome these obstacles. It may not always look how you really expect it to look in the end, but that you can overcome these obstacles in one way or another, and to keep trying and not to give up. So I
Yeah.
think, and I think it's great that they tell it from an Asian perspective, but I think that it's so relatable to really just anybody
Hmm.
who comes in and wants to try out for a sports team, wants to go and pursue, like you said, any of these things that may not necessarily be seen as truly academic or stable, but that you're gonna run up against a lot of scrutiny,
Yeah.
from a lot of different areas. But if you really care about it, and if you really want to do it, then
Yeah.
you got to go all in. And I think, um, even if you don't have a lot of support, and so I think that's one of those things where you got to be able to believe in yourself. And so I think having all of those obstacles with him being Asian, with him being short, with not really, his childhood friend being the cool guy who is on the team and
Right.
pretty much, leading a campaign against him.
Hmm.
Is there's a lot of things for him to overcome, and I think it just helps to kind of spotlight that. So
Yeah.
I think it's good for
And
sure.
I think in the beginning, like the first act of the movie, you can really see he is someone who, like you said, like his old childhood friend is the one who's kind of like the main bully in this. Like you can kind of tell he's pretty, um, what's the word? Poised, I guess, in the face of that because he could have easily just given it right back to him, but he kind of just
Right.
rolls with it a little bit. And I think that shows, a true strength of his character. And then of course the fame and the popularity gets to his head. It's a very it's I mean, like I said, it's a very straightforward kind of, we've seen movies like this before, but I think
Yeah, very
because of the
formulaic.
Asian, yeah, because of the Asian perspective, it makes it a little bit hit differently. Um, and I think like sports movies and like sport metaphors. Like there's a reason why there's so many sport movies. It's because you learn a lot from sports. Not that I really play any, but you learn about like practice makes perfect, getting over those obstacles, making short-term and long-term goals, playing with, as a team. And I think in a lot of ways, those kind of lessons of like perseverance can also apply to a lot of like immigrants who come over here who have to like overcome obstacles and like keep trying and things like that. And so I mean that's why there are sports analogies for lots of situations in life.
For
Um
sure.
yeah, so you mentioned Chang's mom. Or you yes, you did. Okay, I had to think about it for a second. I got like no sleep. So you mentioned Chang's mom, um, and she's not necessarily a single mother, but his parents are separated, and she is a nurse, so she works very hard for the money to and Chang is very into, he's like wants to be Chang 2.0. He wants to have the new clothes, the new hair, the new shoes. Um, and he ruins his shoes, he ruins his phone. And the mom's just really kind of stressed, right? And on
Right.
top of that, she doesn't understand why Chang, well, one, she doesn't even know that Chang is trying to do this challenge of trying to dunk a basketball. But when she finds out, she's like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you causing all this trouble? And, um, she doesn't understand it. And um, I think that's what's interesting. And I would say basketball is a very like American sport, right? Like, um, and so why does Chang want to spend all his time doing these things when he could be studying or being in band, And was there anything in your childhood or even now that like maybe not necessarily like your mom, but like your friends or something they just don't understand and why you're passionate about something?
Probably. I think there's definitely, I'm sure, things. So a big thing of going to Paris, Tennessee was and the reason why this movie hits harder for me. ABC that we were originally going to talk about hits really hard for me. I was adopted. I was raised by white parents, and they never were ones to sit there and go, "We need you to learn about your culture. We need you to be Asian." They wanted me to just if I they never like held me back from it,
Mm-hmm.
but they wanted me to be interested in it. And so when I went to high school, and I am like one of I want to say five, and that may be generous,
Right.
five other Asian kids in this whole high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you already kind of start off on a weird foot because you're not
Yeah.
like everybody else. And
Yeah.
so like if I bring up things like like this whole thing that I've built, this collectibles, this kind of this nerdy culture,
Yeah.
you almost feel like it's over too because a lot of people don't understand, or at least
Mm-hmm.
at that time it wasn't at all something that people related to,
Right.
for the most part, in mass.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those where I think a lot of these things I hid because it wasn't something that I felt that I could relate to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because I was already not like other people.
Right.
And so that's those things where it's like it's like how do you and then of course you find your close friends, and then you kind of share more about yourself, and you grow that that's how bonds grow with your best friends and things like that. So you could share that with a few select few, but as a whole, this is not anything I ever really like pushed out there. I'm sure people probably knew after time, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't something that I was ever very vocal about back then. So I think that's a big thing. You going through college, I was in a fraternity, and so
Yeah.
again, there's this level of things that you talk about. You talk about sports. You talk about just college things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't talk about action figures and comics
Right. Right.
and stuff like that. So and I know this kind of goes along with like what Matt said on the interview that you guys had
Mm.
for Everything Everywhere. It's kind of the same thing. It's just that like this is something that a lot of people don't understand, or a lot of people back then didn't really understand looking
Right.
in. And now it's kind of cool to see that a lot more people understand it, and a lot of people understand, even if they don't agree or collect the same things, they understand the enjoyment that you get out of
Yeah.
collecting and being immersed in some of this stuff. So,
Yeah. Having a
but
passion
that'd probably be it.
for something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
for
and I
sure.
think also I guess I can speak to this maybe better than you can, but the mom when she gets called to the principal's office, immediately doesn't hear Chang's side of the story and it's just very like, I'm so sorry for my son. And like, why are you not apologizing to them without hearing Chang's side? And I think that is something that um a lot of like I think my parents not on that scale because I was never called to the principal's office because I was a good good kid. But no, I never had to have like a parent teacher or something. But just like when you got into like a small fight with like another kid or something over a toy, um, it would always be like I would have to be the one who apologizes, or I would have to be the one to like give the toy to the other kid. And I think it's just the way we were kind of raised to, you know, no confrontation, don't ruffle feathers, just like comply because it's less of a hassle that way. But the mom was very quick to just take the other kid's side and their parents' side. Um, and even in the car, Chang says like, you don't listen to me, and like you don't care about what's happening in my life and what I'm doing in my life. And so, um, and then I watched this movie last week, so forgive me for my memory. I then think he goes to the park and he has that whole montage in the rain where he's like trying to dunk. And so the mom
Right.
sees him putting in this effort. But even then, like even seeing him put in that effort, she's still looking for someone to kind of blame for his change of behavior. And so she blames the coach. She goes to the mall and is like, why did you like make my son do this? And like you're taking advantage of him kind of thing. And the coach is like, no, like your son decided this on his own. And I think that's another thing too, is like a lot of the times, I think this applies to a lot of parents in general, like they don't ever want to see their kid, they're always like, not my kid. Like my kid would never do that kind of attitude. And so she was like looking for someone
Right.
to place blame on. And so I just think it was really, even though this movie was about Chang, and like we could have very easily just had like, oh, Chang's mom just doesn't get it, right? But to have those scenes with the mom by herself doing things and trying to understand, um, I think was so important also to represent, um, especially Asian parents and especially Asian moms. Um, like I think the whole thing with, and then I think we kind of talked about this with my interview with Matt too, like the thing with like generational trauma or, just often disconnect between kids and parents is a lot of times you don't know what your parents are going through. Because when you're a kid, you're just not aware of any of that. Like you don't think to ask your parents that kind
For
of
sure.
stuff. And so I think it was a really good thing that this movie included the perspective of the mom as well. And now I feel like I'm rambling, but I think that
Well, I
cut me off
was
at
just
any
say,
time.
and I was gonna, no, I like your points. I think, and like you said, you can definitely speak to it more than I can, but I think for a lot, but maybe not for just the parent side, is that you want what's best for your
Mhm.
children,
Yeah,
and it's constantly playing the line of practical versus passion.
yeah,
And I think like for what we saw in the movie is that the mom wanted Chang to one, be less sensitive, to not let the world hurt you, because she's had to go through so much struggle to
hmm
get to where they are now.
hmm
And I think she was so worried that he wasn't going to be able to handle the pressures when she wasn't around.
yeah,
And so on top of that, for him not to have a direction, I think it all that scared her, because especially Asians,
hmm
we're supposed to have like this. We There's this kind of idea that we're supposed to have it set in stone what we want to do. We have this rubric we're supposed to follow, right? We have
yeah,
to kind of know early on, because it's going to take so much time and effort. You want to be a musician, fine, then you got to start at the age of 4
right,
before you can even
hmm
touch the keys on a piano.
yeah,
um, by the age of 6, you got to know how. And I mean, my parents are even being white. My parents kind of did this to an extent too. My dad was a musician, so he was very
hmm
structured on how he trained me to
hmm
be, to learn music. And so I think the thing for her was trying to help guide him, but also not understanding what his passions were because he didn't truly understand
Right.
either. And so that was the big disconnect, is that she wanted him to, if he was going to choose something, I think she was trying to kind of guide him towards practical things.
Yeah.
And in turn, because he was a teenager, he wasn't letting her in, and going
Yes.
through, trouble with parents and being separated. That's tough too.
Hmm.
But it's one of those where, because he never let her in, and she was so focused on just trying to guide him in the right way, that how do you guide someone in the right way if the person you're guiding doesn't even know what that is?
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of that disconnect, is she's trying to get him to do something practical, and he's just trying to figure his way out through the world and
Yeah.
grow up. And that was even touched on when she met with Cook,
Hmm. Hmm.
or DeAndre, right? Is his
DeAndre.
name.
Yeah.
When she met with him, is like, he's just trying, and no, it's nobody's fault. It's that he's just
Yeah.
trying to grow up. And
Yeah.
that's for all of us at that age, is just trying to figure ourselves out and what we want to do and what we truly find passion in. And then when she saw
Mhm.
that video and she did see how much
He
effort
put
and passion
into
he
it.
had in it, that's when she
Hmm.
realized. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's when she realized that was a big thing. It's been a long time that she's seen that drive from him. So
Yes. Yeah. Because I remember he was like, "Oh, I don't want to volunteer at the hospital," and she's like, "You're the one who signed up to volunteer at the hospital." And I think, in a way, I guess, like you were saying, like there's like this like a game plan basically. Like I thought I was going to be a doctor, so I was
yeah,
like, to be a doctor, I need to go like volunteer at the hospital, kind of thing. So you think you're doing the check marks and like going through it, like this is, but when you enter something that's a little bit more of the unknown, like when he wants to make a slam dunk, it's like, okay, how do we get there, right? And that's when they sought out that coach, because they're like, we don't know what the game plan is because we've never seen anybody else do that, and we don't, it's the unknown, right? Like your whole life, maybe I'm making an assumption here just because he wanted to volunteer at the hospital, but like maybe his whole life he thought he was like, oh, I want to be a
right.
doctor. And then now you're shifting into something else and you're just like, I don't have a map for that, you know? And it's interesting you said the thing about like starting at a young age. There's a Korean tradition, I don't know the name of, but like the baby like chooses like an item, and the item is supposed to
Oh, right.
predict what they're
I've
gonna
heard
be
about
when they
this. Yeah.
grow up.
That,
Yeah, it's, not, I don't think a lot of the, I think it's more ceremonial than it is like, oh, they picked the pen, they
yeah.
have to be a writer, but it
Right.
does show that they emphasize um what their kid's future is going to be like. And so enough for it to be like a tradition like that. So um
Well, what was it like in Crazy Rich Asians, where they say, or it's Michelle Yeoh's character says, following one's passions is such an American thing,
yeah.
like,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's interesting to always hear, like, think about that every now and again, is that, like, it's, again, it comes down to the whole practicality versus passion thing, and
Right.
where
Yeah.
do you draw that line, and which way do you go, which trail do you
Hmm.
choose? And especially like when you have the background, and you have your family who is pushing you to do things that are practical, as
Hmm.
opposed to being here in America, where we're gonna try, American try to push, do what you love, do what
The
makes
land
you
of
happy.
dreams. Yeah,
uh, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think um I remembered my point from earlier. Like even though Chang knows his relationship with his mom is not what he wants it to be, he still does these things where like when he cooks the soup and he's like, "Oh, look, I'm doing something
Sorry,
nice
dog's
for."
barking.
um, he's like, "Oh, I'm cooking this soup as like a nice gesture for the mom," and it was such a thing where the mom is like, there's not enough
Needs
salt
more
in this.
salt.
Yeah, and that's so something I can relate to. Like, and of course, they kind of get into it at the dinner table later, but That's still something like I can relate to with my mom. Like even something on that small of a scale where I'm like, oh look, I picked up lunch for you today, and she's like, well, why did you go to that place? It's so expensive, and like blah blah blah. And I'm like,
Right.
well, I got us lunch, so like it was a nice gesture.
Right.
Um, but I think I was able to relate to just that small moment. Um, and as I've talked about, I feel like in every interview this year, I, for one, I think I have a great relationship with my mom. But we do have those moments where, like that movie addresses, it's just those kind of small things where they criticize you, and it kind of just they just uh, causes that tiny bit of friction that can like turn into something bigger, which is what happened. Chang is trying to kind of meet his mom in the middle there, and she's still very like critical of it, and then he takes it the wrong way, and still thinks that his relationship with her is strained. I wanted to touch on I guess like Asian role models, like we talked about Yao Ming. There's like Jeremy Lin. Um, who was that guy? He was like really, really tall. His name was like Sun. I want to say his name was like Sun Ming Ming. Do you remember this guy? He was a basketball player. I don't know what team he played for.
Oh, I remember who you're talking about. His name escapes me, but I
Yeah,
know
there's
exactly.
him.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods, and now with like the younger generation, we have like Nathan Chen and Chloe Kim. Like I could name a lot of actually Asian American athletes. Michelle Kwan, Christina Yamaguchi. Um, were there ever any like role models, I guess maybe specifically in sports, that like whenever my parents like have posters of like Michael Chang, posters of like Yao Ming jersey. I mean, it's like a big thing. It was like, insanity on
Oh
a
yeah.
smaller scale in our household. So, did you ever have
Yeah.
anybody like that?
I did. I mean, Yao Ming's very much a pinnacle for me.
Yeah.
Just I had all my best friends in Chicago. We always used to play basketball, and I was terrible. Let's be honest. But it's again, and then I'm short, so again, I have that going for me too, and
Mhm.
or I guess going against me
Against you, yeah.
if we're um.
This is why
But it's
Adam
one
and
of
I
those
played
where
golf.
there you go. But it was big one. But I also played baseball for a long time, and so for me, baseball players were a big
Mm.
influence. So Ichiro was a really probably one of my favorite players of all time. Is
Mhm.
the two favorite players that I have for baseball, who are Asian from my childhood, were Ichiro and Hideki Matsui, who went by Godzilla because I love that. Um, uh, um, but Ichiro was so different because Ichiro came into the league. He was a rookie in 2001,
Mhm.
so that kind of dates, I guess, us too, as we get older.
You're
Um,
older than
but
I
Ichiro came into the
am.
league in yeah, it's fair. Ichiro came in the league in 2001, and what was so great about Ichiro is that's like coming off the heels of like the home run kings. You had Barry Bonds, you had Sammy Sosa, you had Mark McGwire. There was such an emphasis on power, and
Mm.
Ichiro comes in, and this guy is just hitting singles, doubles, triples, just making contact, and it was a
Mm.
completely different play style. Um, and he had like this awesome like warm up like batting stance that he always used to do that I always used to imitate.
Nice.
And so but it was just it was so cool to hit for him to come in and then completely kind of flip the script of what people were talking about
Yeah.
and still finding success.
Mm.
He's man, I should have looked it up before the interview, but I mean, he holds the record for hits in both for like overall. I'm pretty sure uh between the Japanese league and here because he played for several years in Japan before he came over. Which is a big thing too because we have a lot of players who come over and they've been playing for years and then they
Mm.
come over here and they're rookies, but they're rookies at like 27,
Right,
28,
right.
30, which is also kind of cool. But yeah, Ichiro was a big influence because it was just this guy who came in hardworking, um, knew what he wanted to do, didn't let the game of how MLB was played here or baseball was played
Mm-hmm.
here change how he played. More
Mm-hmm.
so, he changed the game
Mm-hmm.
um, towards kind of like for people to appreciate and respect what he did. I don't think he had. I was telling somebody this the other day. I don't think he hit below 300 any season he was here in America, which is fantastic. I mean, if you can make contact and get a hit one out of like three at bats, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Or close to it.
Yeah.
So he was always like he's like one of my favorite players of all time, just because
Yeah.
of what he did for baseball and just what he did as like being Asian and being an Asian American here, and just kind of just being unwavering,
Yeah.
especially was a big thing. So,
Yeah. I do really
but
appreciate that in the movie his basketball hero is Kobe.
I do
And
too.
I think I think that's such a great thing. Like, just because you're Asian doesn't mean your heroes have to be Asian. And
For
just
sure.
because, I mean, I watched only snippets of 38 at the Garden, but you watched the whole thing. But
Oh,
like
so good.
all sorts of people were wearing Jeremy Lin's like jersey, um, and not just Asian people, and all sorts of people wear Kobe's jersey, and things like that. So I think it shows that you can relate to people on more than just like that kind of initial surface level. Like, this person looks like me. Obviously there's something there that inspires you. I mean, Kobe's a great role model. Kobe's a great um, athletic hero and just hero in general to like look up to. So I really liked that they did that. He didn't pick Yao Ming and he didn't pick Jeremy Lin as the hero. It was definitely, I think, intentional, that especially with his drive and
Yeah.
him like quoting Kobe and stuff like that was really cool. Um, there's a scene in the movie where Matt calls Chang out for cheating on his dunk. And Matt really gets defensive and in his face, because he definitely is afraid that all his popularity is, gonna go down the toilet. But he accuses Matt of like,
Being
oh,
racist.
yeah, is it because I'm too short? Is it because I'm Asian? And that's when this fight breaks out. Um, and we can see from his school, there's not a lot of Asian people at the school. I didn't really look for them, but his best friend was Asian, and then I kind of didn't see anybody else. So, you said you were one of maybe five Asians at your school. Um, what was that experience like? Like, were you like very hyper aware of that statistic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, very much so. It's and I think it's something that we've talked about it a bit, and I've talked about it with a lot of my Asian friends because that I have now,
Mm-hmm.
because something that I've realized as I get older is that I've used being Asian almost as a punchline, as a way of survival. You go to a school that's predominantly white or not, or black, or just not Asian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those where I always felt like I just, from day one, tough skin,
Mm-hmm.
don't let things get to you.
Yeah.
And then as you get to know people, the way that I fit in was making fun of myself, because I always felt like if I made fun of myself first, then one, it takes away the chance of like bullying,
Yeah.
but it also means like, oh, well, he's just cool with who he is, and
Yeah.
we can, and so I think there's two things that I took away from him, or Matt being called racist in this was, um, I also I also feel like at times we can take things a little too too sensitively, you know, and
Yeah.
that his mom even said so. Like, you know, you take it almost to a point where you take it out of context so much
Yeah.
that you let these things get to you that actually weren't meant to be taken that way.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I'm always kind of worried about is like I don't want to like assume that somebody was being
Right.
being racist or saying something that they really didn't mean to. But on the flip side, I also can see I can see both sides
Hmm.
because it's one of those where if you allow that to happen and you don't say anything, then it opens up the door of it happening more and people
Yeah.
thinking that it's okay. So it's such a like thin line that you have to play.
Yeah.
Um, and it was so tough for me like coming to CBU because I was around a lot more Asian people, and that was tough for me because
Hmm.
I am one of the only ones, and I'm making jokes like and a lot of people for most of my life are like, you were like the whitest Asian I know. And I never
Hmm.
like really like, I never really, that never really dug into me
Yeah.
until I got out of these
Yeah.
predominantly white areas, and then I meet other Asian cultures and I talk to people and I'm like, wow, um, you almost feel a little embarrassed because it's just like, man, I've done a really poor job of understanding my own culture and then
Yeah.
also kind of standing up for other people's, other people. And it was kind of how I felt with the main character in ABC was like, you know, he had the chance to call somebody out for being
Yeah.
racist, and
Yeah.
instead he kind of turned the other. And that hit me a little bit hard because I feel like I've definitely had those moments when I was younger.
Definitely.
Um, and so it's very much a more focused attention to it, and I can't change how I was back then, but I can change how I am now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the push is understanding not everything's going to be racist and not everybody means for things to be
Hmm.
racist, but at the flip side, don't if it definitely comes off as it is, then I feel like there's a responsibility to
Yeah.
say it. In that situation, I definitely don't think it was, and
No.
I think he was just being sensitive to the situation. I mean, sensitive to everything, and he was just trying to grasp at straws, which I
Yeah.
think some people
Yeah.
unfortunately do.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I think that was a really good scene to add in there because you could tell from Matt's reaction to basically being called racist. He's like, "What are you
Right.
talking? That's not at all like." Like it's not about you and your stereotype or your culture. It's about, just you as a person and what you're doing,
Right. The fact that
and
you in
as a
fact did
person,
cheat,
which is
and I think
exactly who would have bet.
and I think also uh this is something like I noticed when I watched Wendy Wu, like Homecoming Warrior a couple of years ago. Like nobody really mentions that Chang is Asian. Like, like none of his schoolmates ever make any sort of comment acknowledging the fact that he's Asian, whether it's positive or negative. And so for
Right.
Chang to all of a sudden just kind of be like, is it because I'm Asian? I was like, nobody has said anything about your Asianness this whole
Yeah.
movie. But I agree, like everything you said. Like I think everybody goes through this journey of like we've all been teased, whether it's for how we look, how we talk, how we eat, what food we eat, whatever it may be. And like you said, like beating people to the punch or rolling with that is a survival method. But I think everybody has their journey, and I think I can never remember a time when I was not proud to be Asian. But I will say I am guilty of like when I remember I was called like a banana in high school, and I didn't take it. I kind of took it like yes because I'm very Americanized, but not realizing in my head what banana really means is kind of like like almost like an erasure. Like you don't claim your racial background, and that was not at all how I felt about being Chinese. But I was like, yeah, I'm super Americanized. I'm not like those other Asians who like just moved here or something who aren't Americanized and assimilated. So that's how I kind of took it. So things like that. And I think just over time, through things like movies, through things like media and like learning from your friends and your community, you start to understand your own self better. And then like you said, we gain the tools to help others in our community who need our support and sometimes need us to help, stand up for them and things like that. Yeah. We only
Yeah,
have a couple of
I
minutes
agree.
left. So Adam, do you have a small AAPI business shout out?
I'd like to definitely shout out Matt, who you had on for the interview with Everything Everywhere. He's currently in the process of growing his small business. He's kind of in
Mm,
the same market. He's doing a lot of collectibles. I think he's going to start doing trading cards and things like that as well, which I'm really
oh,
excited
nice.
to see that flip for him too. His he right now I believe he's on a stream app that we actually met on. We only met at the beginning of the year, which is crazy how close we've
Yeah,
become since then. But he's on a streaming platform called Whatnot and under the name Spidey Moves, which is kind of a culmination of some jobs that he's had in the past and then who he is. He's done dancing and things like that. So
yeah,
um, I'm excited to see how his journey and how he continues to grow that business. And I definitely want to continue to support and shout him out because he does an amazing job supporting everybody else, but
yeah,
also it's good to see what he's learning from everybody else and kind of putting into his own business. So I think he's destined for great things, and
nice.
I want to make sure that we're all there to support him during that
Yeah,
journey.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Adam, for another great interview. And also thank you for pivoting your watch schedule
Sure,
for me. Um, so this is a few days left in May.
I
So be
know.
sure to follow Adam on his account. He's posting some AAPI superheroes and pop culture characters throughout the month of May. And be sure to follow Jubilant and like the Instagram post so that we can donate to
Yes.
Peak and Asian Pacific Fund.